Welcome to the road to 1 million US dollars, and let's get right into the Bitcoin chart for today. As always, nothing in this video is my personal opinion. I am only sharing the unbiased technical analysis and nothing more. Starting off in the immediate short term for Bitcoin with this 2-hour time frame, because currently we are trading inside this ascending channel pattern here, which means that we have an ascending line of resistance, which currently is sitting at 92.7k, slowly trending up over time. And we have an ascending line of support as well, which currently is sitting at 87.9k. Now, so long as in the short term we are holding inside this pattern, Bitcoin is simply trending up over time. However, there are some short-term signals that we should keep an eye on here. For example, notice how on this 1-hour time frame we have a potential bearish divergence here, which is when you have higher highs in the Bitcoin price and lower highs in the RSI momentum indicator. Typically, this points towards us getting a break from all of this bullish price action we saw here recently, either in the form of some choppy sideways price action or potentially even some bearish momentum. Before we continue with anything else though, I want to be very clear that this bearish divergence has not confirmed yet. So this is why this next part is going to be about invalidations of bearish divergences, because let's say that this does confirm by actually getting some bearish candle closes here, or basically the price just starting to chop sideways, trading down even a little bit in the short term. That would be the confirmation signal for that bearish divergence. Now, for example, if we just continue pumping to the upside here, then we are no longer looking at the same bearish divergence, meaning that it is already invalidated before even confirming in the first place. And in the case that it does just keep pumping to the upside here, you should look for another potential bearish divergence once again, because it would just be a little bit higher up. And then from there, you need to look if we are forming another lower high in the RSI momentum indicator. Once again, getting some bearish candle closes back to back. That would actually be the confirmation signal for yet again another bearish divergence. Now, the reason I'm talking about this ahead of time is because I only make one of these videos every single day, so I want to show you guys what to look out for over the next 24 to 48 hours. Another thing about bearish divergences is that in the case that, for example, it does confirm right here, well, we start chopping sideways, maybe a little bit down from there, and if we would then just turn around and start making a new higher high in the Bitcoin price, then you have to actually redraw your trend line once again and see if there's a new bearish divergence potentially confirming at that point. But that initial bearish divergence that would have confirmed is then no longer active. And just looking at one more side note here, just because there is a bearish divergence doesn't mean that suddenly we are going to get some kind of massive crash to the downside, right? You need to look at all the different signals across the different time frames in order to know what to expect next. Because, for example, if I zoom out to this 4-hour time frame, while this was previously in a massive downtrend right here, if we are now looking at the shorter term, we are clearly just in an ascending trend at the moment, which is also what I showed you on that 2-hour time frame in that ascending channel pattern. Overall, things are still looking relatively bullish for Bitcoin, so long as we're able to hold above 86.2k and continuing to stay on that trend of looking at critical levels. Notice how right here as well, we have one of these lower highs that formed around this 92.5k level. This is the critical level to break, call it this descending trend line here. Then we are actually starting to make new highs above these previous lower highs, which is going to be absolutely critical in order to get that early signal of a potential higher time frame trend reversal. Notice how on this 1-day time frame we are just making lower highs and lower lows still. However, there's of course a lot more stuff going on the lower time frames. So if the lower time frames are already looking very bullish and creating a bullish type of structure, then that could be that early signal that we are indeed getting a change of the trend. Although overall on the higher time frames, which are of course going to be the last to actually confirm the trend change, it will first show up on the lower time frames. At the very least, we would need to see a break of this descending trend line here, currently sitting at 96.4k, but even better would be a break above this 106k level, because once again at that point we are actually making higher highs in the Bitcoin price. Now, before we move on to the Bitcoin ETF flow tables and even that liquidity analysis as well, I also wanted to point out that we are currently trading inside this critical area of resistance, sitting from 90k all the way up to 92. if we start confirming daily candle closes above this 92k level, the next area of resistance above on this daily time frame is already sitting from 95 up to 96k. Moving on to the Bitcoin ETF flow tables, because yesterday we saw a tiny net inflow here of about $20 million in a single day of trading. Overall, these Bitcoin ETFs aren't really doing anything, having any major impact on the Bitcoin price. These are all relatively small in and outflows here, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Moving on to the Bitcoin liquidation heat map. In the case that you don't know, typically the Bitcoin price gets attracted to where there is the most liquidity on this chart. So right here, you can see that over the past 2 weeks, we have now created liquidity to the upside around this 97k, 95k, and even 92.7k level, but a bunch of liquidity has showed up over the past 3 days or so. So zooming into that 3-day time frame, once again, liquidity to the upside, yes, but in the short term, there is also a bunch of liquidity to the downside, even as low as 85k, but also 89k and even 90,000. Coming back to this 2-hour time frame then, because that liquidity to the downside around that 90k level and that 89k level as well, that tells us that we need to keep an open mind about possibly seeing a rollover here. And yes, even if that were to be the case, if we go to the bottom of that ascending channel, so long as we're holding inside that pattern, technically Bitcoin is still just trending towards the upside, right? So to quickly summarize, on the 1-day time frame, we haven't seen a proper change of the trend yet because the market structure is technically still bearish at the moment. However, on the lower time frames, for example, this 2-hour time frame, we're still trending to the upside, although there are some potential short-term warning signals that we should not completely forget about. So this has been today's market update. Thank you very much for watching once again. I make one of these videos every single day, guys, so make sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications on so you do not miss any of these important update videos. But regardless, if you do end up subscribing or not, thank you for watching once again, and I will see you tomorrow in the next one.